Causal ignorance. Where did this misunderstanding start? The principle involved in the question is causality. Causality is only a synonym for diversity. The fundamental misunderstanding from which every other misunderstanding originates is the thought that I am the body. This misunderstanding, which is merely a thought form, can never exist in the physical plane. It exists only in the mental plane. In that plane, the body cannot exist. Therefore, the cause and effect can neither coexist nor exist in different planes. Beyond the mind, there is no diversity at all. But you are searching for the cause of the misunderstanding in the plane beyond. Or in other words, you are trying to establish diversity in the plane beyond, where there is no diversity. Thus, if you continue to inquire into the cause of avidya, the false knowledge or ignorance, you would still be entangled within the boundaries of that ignorance itself. Why was the artificial state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi invented? The pioneers of the traditional cosmogony of the jnana path understood and interpreted the spontaneous state of deep sleep as the seat of causal ignorance. It was with a view to avoid or remove this ignorance by human effort that the Nirvikalpa Samadhi was invented. They succeeded in their goal only partially, because when they came out of the Samadhi state, the shroud of ignorance engrossed them once again. So a permanent solution had to be sought again. What about the causal body of ignorance? The causal body of ignorance, that is, the unmanifested potential of the unconscious, cannot exist. Ignorance is the absence of everything. When you say there is the absence of a cow here, it only means that it is not present here to the fleshy organ, but is present only to the subtle organ of the mind. The absence of anything is dependent directly upon the presence of that thing. Thus, the negative of anything cannot exist by itself without at least an unconscious reference to the positive. So the causal body of ignorance is a misnomer. As Sri Shankara says, I am that unmixed absolute, just that one perfect happiness, attained in the depth of deep, dreamless sleep. How to prove that there is no ignorance in deep sleep? After awaking from deep sleep, we make two spontaneous assertions. The first, I was at peace. And the second, I did not know anything. These two statements refer to the very same experience, one in a positive way and the other in a negative, and therefore they cannot be different. In fact, the second is only a paraphrase of the first. The second statement means only that I did not know anything other than the positive experience of deep peace in deep sleep. So there was no causal body present there at all. There was no body of unconscious potentiality that was implying an unmanifest world. This proves not the existence of the unconscious, but rather its non-existence in deep sleep. Through another approach, that which precedes is said to be the cause, and that which succeeds the effect. Here, the time element is essential to make this distinction possible and to establish causality. But standards of time differ fundamentally in the waking state and in the dream state. And in deep sleep, time does not exist at all. Where there is no concept of time, neither causality nor a causal body can exist. For this reason also, there is no ignorance in deep sleep, but only deep peace, undisturbed by any other experience. Understanding deep sleep correctly in this way, you find the I principle consciousness there in its real nature, in its purity. This I principle shines incessantly through all states. So when you say you wake up from deep sleep, it is wrong. For your deep sleep, as your real nature, continues always without a break. That is to say, you never come out of the I principle of pure consciousness. All the worlds created by you in the waking and dream states are withdrawn into you in deep sleep. The world as such does not exist in deep sleep, but only as the pure I principle consciousness. But what is ignorance really? It is said to be the source of the world. The usual example given to illustrate this is the illusion of the serpent in the rope. Here, the ignorance of the rope, coming just between the rope and the serpent, is said to be the cause of the serpent. So, when the serpent disappears, it is the ignorance that should naturally remain over. But when you bring in a light and examine the serpent, it disappears altogether. And in its place, instead of the ignorance supposed to be its cause, you see only the rope in its nakedness, beyond all doubt. So this ignorance, which never had any existence independently of the serpent, is also non-existent. Hence, the ignorance is the object perceived itself. Or in other words, ignorance means only wrong notion. The world is only a distorted vision of the self by the self. We should accept only that which agrees with our higher reason and reject all the rest. In the illustration, we do not first see the rope in its entirety, but only its existence. That is to say, this alone of the rope is seen. So in the two experiences of this is a rope and this is a serpent, it is upon the this that the serpent is superimposed. So when the serpent disappears, naturally the this alone, which is the real part of the perception, remains over. Assuming that the this remains, you must not leave the this vague, as it is likely to give rise to other superimpositions. It should be made clear, beyond any possibility of a mistake, and seen as pure consciousness itself. The serpent of superimposition is not likely to be removed until you get a clear perception of the rope. When the serpent is removed, the rope alone shines. Causality. What is the cause of the world, if there is any cause? A cause implies that without which the result cannot appear at all. For example, the serpent cannot appear if the rope is not there already. But we know that the rope never undergoes any change. In a similar way, the world can never appear if Atma, the self, is not behind it, without undergoing any change. Therefore, if any cause is to be posited for the world, the most correct answer would be Atma itself. Thus, in fact, there is no creation, and if creation is taken for granted, Atma is only the cause of it. But causality can never exist in Atma. So you're saying that causality is a misnomer? The thief comes in surreptitiously whenever you ask a question applying the principle of causal relationship. Causality is the product of the waking state. It is the waking state itself. It can never be successfully answered from the waking state, where alone the law of causality obtains. To answer the question, one must get beyond the waking state to the dream or mental state. Then causality and the question both disappear as mere illusion. One who raises such a question is pinned to the waking state. It may pertinently be asked, is there not causality in the dream state? No, certainly not. Because what we call the dream state is a full-fledged waking state when it is experienced. And it is called a dream state only when it is past. Then causality, which appeared quite reasonable when the so-called dream was in progress, becomes unreal. This amounts to admitting that causality is not real in the dream state. There is no connection between objects themselves and the waking state. Causality is only an object, just like any other object. And the senses also are only objects, just like others. Therefore, you cannot establish causal relationship between any two objects of the waking state. But can causality function under any condition? No, not even in the same order of time, much less when the order of time also changes. For example, the sun sets and darkness comes. Can the preceding sunshine be said to be the cause of darkness, or vice versa? Of course not. It is absurd. Therefore, causal relationship cannot be established between such changing states, which have no connection whatsoever between them. But causality seems to function, and how does it do that? Remember, causality is a misnomer, and it never really functions. This is said from the highest level. But viewing it from a lower level, when one object is supposed to produce another, the former is said to be the cause and the latter the effect. But the relationship between cause and effect has to be examined more closely, though from the standpoint of the waking state. There can be only two possible positions if we adopt this approach. The first is that the cause and effect are entirely different from one another. And the second, that they are not different. If we accept the first position, causality cannot function because a cause cannot produce an entirely different effect. And if they are different, as in the second position, then causality has no meaning. Therefore, in either case, causality is a misnomer. The urge to search for a cause shows that you are dissatisfied with the effect and that you consider the cause to be more real. Therefore, everything that comes under the category of effect is considered to be relatively unreal. And the ultimate cause or source is alone considered real. So you negate the effect and seek the real source in the name of causality. Therefore, the inquiry into the cause is also an indirect search for the ultimate truth. Change and changelessness. What is the most concrete of all things? Concrete literally means real or changeless. Name and form are constantly changing. And their background, Atma, the self alone, is real. Body, senses, and mind are changing. And the I principle as consciousness alone is changeless or real through all states and times. In that sense, this I principle is the only concrete thing, and all else is but illusion. What is the witness? The witness is that which is changeless, the I, amongst changes. Changes cannot appear without the changeless, but the changeless exist independent of all changes. Changes can take place only in the changeless, but changes, when examined, are found to be nothing but the changeless. All changes are in the changeless, but the changeless itself never changes. But I am not the changeless. Why? I perceive changes. To make this possible, I must have been the changeless background perceiving the changes. But changelessness only means the absence of change. They are opposites. A taint of the change lingers in the very conception of changelessness. So I must transcend changelessness also, in order to be in my real nature. Therefore, the path to the ultimate lies from the changing through the changeless to the beyond. What is second childhood? You are first born into this world as a child in ignorance, and subsequently, on reaching maturity, you hear the truth from the Guru and are liberated. Then you become a child in knowledge, never to change. So only a sage can really be said to have a second childhood. But who is the real child? The worldly child, who is a child in ignorance, and the sage, who is a child in knowledge, are both unattached to objects. The child has not acquired the capacity to think, and the sage has gone beyond the capacity to think. But the child leaves a slight samskara, a latent tendency, behind after every activity, while the sage leaves nothing behind. Therefore, the sage alone is the real child. Is there a connection even in separateness? Even concerning the so-called phenomenal knowledge, it is knowledge in identity. We say A and B are there without any apparent relationship between them, except the recognition of the existence of each other. So there is this connection established between consciousness and existence. Thus, knowledge bridges the gulf of separateness. How is life a connected whole? Life consists of independent and disconnected appearances, of actions, perceptions, and mentations upon Atma, the self, the changeless background. Thus, it is Atma that keeps the continuity of phenomenal life.